Welcome back to more history of Haute Couture. Part 2, The Next Generation of Couturiers. Recalling Part 1, we covered Charles Frederick Worth, who opened his fashion house in 1858. What followed him were dozens of incredible fashion designers. They made a significant mark on fashion in both Paris and around the world, setting trends and redefining garments in a rapidly changing world. In 1868, the Haute Couture regulatory body was established. By 1945, Haute Couture became a legal designation and they were renamed the Chambre syndicale de la Haute Couture. The definitions have been revised a few times, and now, according to the Business of Fashion, to qualify as an official Haute Couture house, members must design made-to-order clothes for private clients with more than one fitting, using an atelier, or workshop, that employs at least 15 full-time staff. They must also have 20 full-time technical workers in one of their workshops. Finally, Haute Couture houses must present a collection of no less than 50 original designs, both day and evening garments, to the public every season in January and July. 1871 to 1914 was marked by a period of economic growth, interest in arts and culture, and overall stability in France. This was called La Belle Epoque. It was a fantastic time to open a fashion house. In 1895, the Soeurs opened their couture house. I wasn't able to get a picture of the four sisters who founded the house: Marie Caillot-Gerber, Marthe Caillot-Bertrand, Regina Caillot-Tennyson-Chantrelle, and Josephine Caillot-Clément. As Orientalists, these designers drew inspiration from the softer shapes, raised waists, and prints of the Far East. Using lingerie-weight fabrics embellished with a wide variety of ornamentation, these dresses flowed and sparkled brilliantly in evening lighting. Caillot-Soeurs closed in 1952. Another designer on our list, Madeleine Vionnet, worked for the Caillot-Soeurs early in her career. She said, "Without the example of the Caillot-Soeurs, I would have continued to make Fords. It is because of them that I have been able to make Rolls-Royces." Jeanne Lanvin opened her millinery in 1889. She began training as a milliner, or hat maker, before opening her own millinery. She gained attention for the dresses she made for her daughter, so she opened a department for children's clothes. In 1909, she evolved to full status as a couturier. In 1926, she became the first Parisian to launch a made-to-measure menswear line. It was the only place in Paris that offered both men's and women's collections. Paul Poiret opened his fashion house in 1903. With humble roots, Poiret began as an apprentice to an umbrella maker at the suggestion of his mother. He used scraps of silk to make dolls and made drawings that got him employed by design houses. Eventually, he began working at the House of Worth. There, his barefoot looks and loose fabrics were not to the tastes of the conservative clientele, so he began his own atelier. His main inspirations were his wife, a slender woman, and the Orient. Subverting convention, he removed the petticoat from his designs and later the corset. He was famed for kimono-style garments, and he is known for developing techniques in draping that we know of today. Mariano Fortuny y Madrazo opened his couture house in 1906. He was the son of Mariano Fortuny y Marsal, a painter who died when Mariano was only 3. His mother was a seamstress, and she exposed him at a young age to textiles. He later married Henriette Negrin, a dressmaker who constructed many of his designs. Mariano was a polymath, an inventor, artist, and fashion designer. Working out of the Palazzo Pesaro Orfei in Venice, he displayed his father's artwork, made inventions, and designed clothes. He was not interested in the flapper trend, and instead, he created the Delphos gown. Inspired by the statue, Charioteer of Delphi, it was a pleated shift dress weighed down by glass beads to hold its shape. The hand pleating is incredibly fine. His gowns are still intact and sold today, with one selling in 2001 for $10,000. Gabrielle Chanel opened her millinery in 1909. Eventually, Chanel would outgrow her small millinery and open a boutique on the now famous 31 Rue Cambon. She got her start on the back foot in life. She was sent to a convent for rejected and poor children where she learned how to sew. In a series of affairs, she entered the life of opulence and wealth, which led to the funding of her first shop. She was notable for using jersey knit, quilted fabric, and traditionally masculine colors such as gray and navy blue. Her military and flat-chested style was in stark contrast to the hourglass shapes of the Edwardian era. Her garments eventually became incredibly popular, making the list of all those who traveled to Paris for couture. Jean Patou opened his first couture house in 1912. As written in Patou's website, he was a dandy of the roaring 20s and an enlightened aesthete with impeccable taste. He traveled all over Europe and the United States with an eternal cigarette between his fingertips. The American press describes him as the most elegant man in Europe. A socialite, Jean Patou liked to party and dine at Maxim's. He himself organized evening runway shows that sometimes went on until the early morning. Infatuated with high speed and thrills, Jean Patou drove racing cars, gambled at casinos, and sailed speedboats on the open sea. A man in motion, Patou was always pulling forward. From a family of tanners, he knew he wanted to be a couturier. He opened his boutique called Maison Paris, but it was interrupted by World War I. Following the war, he reopened his couture house in 1914 and was known for working against flapper fashion, lengthening the skirt, creating comfortable sportswear for women, inventing the knitted swimwear, inventing the tennis skirt, popularizing the cardigan, and using natural and comfortable styles. After the stock market crash in 1929, he launched the most expensive perfume in the world, Joy, to keep his brand afloat. Joy is known as the perfume of the century by many. It has a floral scent, but not of one particular flower. Madeleine Vionnet opened her couture house in 1912. Born to a poor family in France, she moved to London to work as a fitter for Kate Riley, a dressmaker. She returned to France to work as a toile maker for Callot, Soeurs, all before opening her own atelier. Vionnet's bias-cut clothes dominated haute couture in the 1930s, and she was known as the architect of fashion. A bias cut is when the weave is cut diagonally rather than parallel to the fiber. She set trends with her sensual gowns worn by such internationally known actresses as Marlene Dietrich, Katharine Hepburn, Joan Crawford, and Greta Garbo. Vionnet retired in 1940. In her lifetime, she created tens of thousands of garments, but she always eschewed frivolous displays of wealth and preferred to live simply. World War I was an unprecedented, horrific event which interrupted the careers of many of the designers on our list. It was also a major catalyst for change. Cristobal Balenciaga opened his couture house in 1919. He was considered the master of us all by Christian Dior. His father was a fisherman who died when he was a child, and his mother was a seamstress. Balenciaga began as an apprentice to a tailor. After designing for the foremost noblewoman in his town, she sent him to formally learn the craft. He is one of the few fashion designers with skills in patterning and sewing. During the Spanish Civil War, he relocated to Paris. He broadened the shoulders, removed the waist, and developed the chemise dress. His most famous client was Fabiola de Mora y Aragon. He designed her wedding dress, which drew intense media attention. Balenciaga was unrelenting in his standards. He has also designed the balloon jacket, the high-waisted baby doll dress, the cocoon coat, the balloon skirt, and the sack dress. He taught fashion design classes, inspiring Oscar de la Renta, André Courreges, Emmanuel Ungaro, Mila Schoen, and Hubert de Givenchy. Coco Chanel said that he was the only couturier in the truest sense of the word. The others are simply fashion designers. Elsa Schiaparelli opened her couture house in 1927. Born in Rome to an aristocratic family, her father was the dean of the University of Rome. Schiaparelli would attend the same university to study philosophy. Always having odd tastes, she rebelled often and took enormous risks in her life. Mentored by Poiret, she began work on her own fashion line in 1927. Without any formal training, she used draping techniques to create wearable and uncontrived designs. Starting with knitwear, she worked on surrealism and eccentric fashion. Her inspiration includes the human body, insects, and trompe l'oeil, which means optical illusion. She was one of the first to create the wrap dress, visited decades later by Diane von Furstenberg. Schiaparelli was well known among artists and writers, being well cited and spoken about in her era. She has collaborated with Salvador Dali and Jean Cocteau. Maine Rousseau Bocher opened his couture house in 1929. A native of Chicago, he served in Paris during World War I and chose to remain there. He worked as a fashion illustrator for Harper's Bazaar, then fashion editor for Vogue, and eventually the editor-in-chief of Vogue France in 1927. Bocher launched his brand, Maine Bocher, in 1929. He was the first American couturier, launching his brand in Paris before moving it to New York. He preceded Dior's new look by 8 years, creating a silhouette in ode to Edwardian shapes, the Maine Bocher corset. He continued to make clothing during the Second World War, shortening the skirts to account for rationing. Some of his other innovations included beaded evening sweaters, strapless evening gowns, bare-armed blouses for suits, costume-dyed furs, the waist cinch, the dress with tie-ons, the sari evening dress, the bump shoulder, the revival of crinolines, and the rain suit. He had a long history of designing for Wallis Simpson. He created her wedding dress in what was to become one of the most photographed and copied gowns of modern times. His taste signifies exclusivity, good breeding, and rarefied taste, according to Cameron Silver, a fashion director. The stock market crashed in 1929, causing financial distress that cascaded around the world. This was a time of instability for many designers. The instability of the Great Depression led to some drastic measures for drastic times. The leader of the extreme fascist party, Adolf Hitler, was elected into power. Many history geeks know that this led to a ghastly takeover of neighboring countries that were repelled and eventually defeated by the Allied troops. Pierre Balmain opened his couture house in 1945. Born from a family in the wholesale drapery business, his mother ran a boutique with her sisters. He studied architecture and worked for Robert Piguet. He subsequently worked for Edouard Molyneux, then Lucien Lelong, alongside Christian Dior. His styles resembled the popular New Look by Dior. His designs were very popular, and he toured the world. He dressed the likes of Queen Sirikit of Thailand, Nicaraguan First Lady Hope Portocarrero, Marlene Dietrich, and Katharine Hepburn. Christian Dior opened his couture house in 1946. He was born in a seaside town to a wealthy merchant. He chose to work in the arts, and he left school to found an art gallery that included works by Pablo Picasso. It closed down following the death of his mother, brother, and the failure of his father's business during the Great Depression. In 1937, he trained under Robert Piguet, who taught him the principle of elegance from simplicity. He left to serve in World War II and returned to fashion by working for the designer Lucien Lelong. He was known for reviving fashion after the Second World War with his New Look, which drew inspiration from the Edwardian era. The following year, he launched another line, the Corelle line. In 1948, the new line was the Envol and Cyclone or Zigzag line. In 1949, it was the Trompe l'oeil or Optical Illusion and Mid-Century lines. In 1950, it was the Vertical and Oblique lines. In 1951, it was the Naturelle or Princess and Long lines. In 1952, it was the Sinueuse and Profilée lines. In 1953, it was the Tulipe and Vivante lines. In 1954, it was the Muguet or Lily of the Valley and H line. In 1955, it was the A line and the Y line. In 1956, it was the Flèche or Arrow and Aimant Magnet lines. Before Dior retired, in 1957, it was the Libre or free and Fuseau or spindle lines.